y'all doing this morning? You guys excited to be here? This is a great Sunday morning. We are in our third week of a series we're calling This Is What We Do. And Homeport, you can see this is what we do. We are leading the way with irrational generosity. Little by little, everybody is pouring in and bringing in their items. 19 bags have already been filled, and it looks like we've got plenty more to go around. And that's exciting, that we could be a blessing to the community, like so big. Like, you know, as a small congregation, sometimes we think, what can we do? And it's not what can we do, man. This is what God has done. God has taken us to this place where we are being irrationally generous, where we're blessing people that we don't even know, because we want them to feel the love of God and His presence in their life. We want to be the church that leads the way in our community with irrational generosity, with generosity that doesn't even make sense. How could a little congregation like this be so generous? And this morning I want to talk about the blessings of generosity when we choose to be abundant givers. When we follow Jesus, when we choose to follow Jesus, that little bit of food that you brought in your bag multiplied into this huge harvest of all of this abundance that we're going to be able to give away, because this is what Jesus followers do. And we're going to be talking about this morning. The first I want to get started. I want to tell you a little bit of a story of a woman named Dana. Dana was in her small group, and she was a part of her church. And her church was taking up a special offering, kind of like we'll be taking up the thank offering today. And she went and she looked in her checkbook to see how much she could give. And she realized, after all the receipts were done, she had $5.35 in her pocketbook. I mean, that was it. That was all that was left to get her to her next paycheck, to get her to the next month. And she thought, like, how much can I give? And at first she thought I could give $5. And then she was like, but it might cut it a little close. So she said, embarrassingly, she wrote a $1 check for that offering. That's all she had. That's all that she had to give that day. She put it in the offering that day and gave her check. There was a family, the Schmidts, who were part of her group. They didn't know why, but they just felt drawn to be generous. God started stirring in their hearts. And one day, during their small group time, kind of off to the side, they walked up to Dana and her husband. They gave her an envelope for $1,000. They didn't know why they were supposed to be generous. They didn't know why they were being led to help her out. But God had taken her offering, her sacrificial giving, what little she had left, but her trust, and multiplied it and blessed it. I mean, what an amazing story of generosity. And these are the kinds of stories that when we're a generous church, when we trust in God for our generosity, that we get to share. I was told this morning, and it's always amazing how these details work out. I was told this morning of a single mom in our church who hadn't been paid in 2 weeks. And so there was a lady who was saying, is there any way that she could get a basket? And of course, like, we definitely want to help our people. Like, we want to make sure our people are taken care of. But the crazy thing is that same mom called me on Friday, and she said, hey, Ben, is there anyone to be at the office today? And we close our offices on Fridays. And so there was nobody who was going to be there, but we worked out the details. And she said, I'm going to leave some food there for the Thanksgiving meals. And I came in Friday, and there were 2 big bags of food from a single mom who hadn't gotten paid in 2 weeks, who wanted to participate and wanted to be a part of this blessing. What an amazing story of how God moves and God takes care of us and God provides for us, just like they did for this lady, Dana. And I'm curious, when you hear a story like this, how many of you would love to be blessed like that? How many of you guys would love to be blessed like that? But which side of the blessing would you rather be on? Would you rather be the receiver, the one who got the extra money, the unexpected money? Or would you rather be the one who was so blessed to be able to give and to receive that blessing, knowing that it was going to impact and touch a life. One day, Dana shared that story in her small group of God's blessing, and God's just multiplied generosity onto her. And it was such a powerful moment in that group. So both families are sitting there just pouring out their tears, crying, because God had moved and worked in such an amazing way. And that's what we're after. We want to be God's hands and God's feet when it comes to generosity in every aspect of our life. We want to live generously, not just with our pocketbooks, but with every part of our life, with our time, with our energy, and with all of our resources. We want to give and to be generous because we truly believe what Jesus said when he said it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. But so many of us are fooled by that notion. We're fooled by that notion. And when Christmas comes around, it's a great time to think about this. But when Christmas comes around and you've been nudging your significant other for that gift, right? In the first gathering, I thought that people would track with me, but they didn't. Like I was so far out in left field. Have any of you guys heard about the Instapot? Anybody know the Instapot? Like it's all over Black Friday. It's like part crock pot, part pressure cooker. Like, and you could cook like all kinds of things in it. Like everywhere I read, like I'm reading about this Instapot. Every Black Friday ad, like there's $20 off or $6 off. And I told my wife, I was like, hunt, you know, like. But how many of us, we get to Christmas Day, we've been nudging them for that thing that we really wanted, and we open up the gift, and it's not what we expected, right? I got a big Christmas gift from my in-laws one year. Big box, right? Oh, this is exciting. It's a big box. What's inside of this big box? Pyrex glass Tupperware. Because I told my wife that I was eyeballing Pyrex glass Tupperware, and her mom said, hey, what does Ben want? Well, he's talking about glass Tupperware. And I must have had like the most miserable face on my look. She's like, I'm so sorry. I thought that's what you wanted. And you know, in your heart of hearts, you're like, yeah, but it's not what I wanted for Christmas, right? Like, you know, but it turned out to be a great Christmas gift, and they were very generous, and it was very thoughtful of them. But we've all been suckered into that feeling that it's better to receive than it is to give, to be on the receiving end of that. And that's not true at all. This week I had to go, we were looking for details for some things we're doing for Thanksgiving and Christmas with the middle school we've partnered with. If you know where the tank is, right here on US 1, right behind the tank is a middle school, Gamble Rogers Middle School. And we've partnered with them through the school board to try and help meet needs. And so I went in this week and I was sitting there and I walked into the front office and I said, I have some questions about how we can help partner with your angel tree. And as soon as I said partner with, people were like, there were like 3 women all of a sudden in there. The nurse was in there, the secretary, another lady, and they were all like, what do you mean you want to help out with Christmas? And I was like, yeah. I said, we're going to do an angel tree in our church. So we'd like 20 cards. And she said, 20 cards? I was like, yeah, do you have that available? Do you need to write it down? No, here's 20 cards. You know, she just pours out all these cards on the desk, and we kind of sorted through them and took 20 cards. But man, her eyes were just so big that we would come in and say, hey, we want to help. We want to partner with you guys. We want to take care of some needs, right? And so the first Sunday in December, we've got 19 because somebody already took one. But we have 19 angel tree cards for you guys to help and partner with. And they just have little needs on them. They've spread them out across a couple of different cards. So it's not just like you have to buy everything. But that's just one way we could bless. And I was like, yeah, and for Thanksgiving, you guys have been collecting turkeys and gift cards for turkeys. And I was like, how many do you guys have left? And she says, we need seven turkeys. I said, you need 7 gift cards or 7 turkeys? And she said, no, we want to be able to provide them with the turkey so we know the food goes on the table. And I said, okay, that's fine. So you need 7. And she's like, yeah. And I said, all right, I will get you 7. And I mean, her eyes just lit up. And I wish you guys could be there for those moments because it really is more blessed to give than it is to receive. And Wednesday morning, Candace our ministry assistant here at Homeport, her and I went over to Publix and we picked up 7 turkeys and we took them back to the school. And they were just so elated that we would do something like that. And I said, we've got the fixins for it, so I'm going to bring in, however much you need. We're going to talk next week. I got stuff for you. And they were just so amazed. The congregation just loved them so much, wanted to see that blessing poured out so much in their lives. And that's what we want to do. Because of what Jesus did for us, we want to lead the way with irrational generosity. It doesn't make sense at all because nobody else is doing it, right? Everybody else wants to receive, but we want to be the people that give it all away. We recognize that it's better to give than it is to receive. We've been talking about over the last couple weeks, so that there's a very big difference between giving and generosity. I can give something, a couple dollar bills out of my wallet at the end of the month. I can give that, and I'm a giver. But there's something totally different when I choose to be generous. And we, as Jesus followers and Christ followers, we want to be generous. We want to grow in our generosity and our faith because we see what God has done. But so many of us, and I've been talking to people around the congregation and just kind of gauging where we are. We've been in the midst of that scarcity cycle where we didn't know if we were going to have enough at the end of the month. We didn't know if we were going to have all of our needs met. And so we say, I want to give, I want to be generous, but I can't because I don't have enough. And that generosity cycle, happens when God provides for us through our paycheck and through our living. And then we go and we consume too much. We consume the wrong things. We buy it all up. And then we get to a point where we're lacking. And we don't know where we're going to pay the next bill or pay for all of our groceries. And that scarcity sets in and that fear sets in. We self-medicate on it again. And we go out and we consume more. And it just becomes this vicious cycle where we're living paycheck to paycheck, always wanting to do something, but always stuck in this cycle. But what if there was a different way? And we've been talking about it this month, that as Christians, there is a different way out of the scarcity mindset and into an abundance mindset, because we're not relying on what I can do, but I'm totally relying on what God can do in the midst of all of this. And we want to live in that cycle. The abundance cycle is when we take what God has given us and we return a portion of it back to Him right off the top. It's an act of worship for us to give. Because of His goodness, we tithe and we give our offerings back to Him. And we believe that God is going to open up the floodgates of heaven for us. We talked about that last week. It's not some piddly little floodgate of 8 or 10 feet, but this massive wall pouring out. The Israelites would have known this. The Jews, when Malachi said that God was going to open up the floodgates of heaven, they would have thought of Noah, the first time that terminology was used. And God didn't pour out a puddle, and Noah didn't build a bridge. God opened the floodgates of heaven, and Noah built a boat, and it covered trees and it covered mountains. So this isn't a little bit that God's promising us, but God is promising that He is going to give us so much that we're not even going to be able to hold it all in. And that grows our faith. We watch God work in our life. So many of us are like, God, I don't see you working in our life. And Scripture is full of ways that say, God, this is how God works in your life, right? The end of the Great Commission. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And though I am with you to the very ends of the ages. You want God in your presence? Go make disciples, because that's where He said He is. God said, test me, put me to the test, give your offerings to the church, put your in my temple, and watch the floodgates of heaven open. That's where God works, in trust and obedience, and that's who we are, and that's what we want to do. We want to be those people. Today, I want to talk about how we can grow to become abundant givers, reflecting the heart of abundantly giving God, who's blessing people all around us. And this morning I want to talk about it in three different ways that us as Christ followers can faithfully give back. The first one, if you're taking notes, the first I fill in the blank is to give spontaneously. And a lot of people give spontaneously. And it's that moment where you see a need in somebody else's life and you think to yourself, I can meet that need. God has given me more in this moment, in this period of time, and I can help. And maybe it's somebody with food, or maybe it's a next door neighbor has a need and you help them out in those kinds of ways, but we give very spontaneously. And it's always an honor to meet those needs. It's always a pleasure to be able to help out. And many of us, we give in that way. An earthquake strikes in Haiti, a tsunami in India, or the hurricanes that have ravished St. Augustine and flooded our city out 2 years in a row. And you guys give. You help your neighbor go carry out their wet, soggy sofa. You give, that's abundantly giving. You're giving of your time and your energy. You see needs, or maybe you give to an organization that specifically helps those that are recovering from natural disasters. A portion of the thank offering today is going to go to those that are still reeling after the effects of the last hurricane that we had come through. But we give and give and give to help people recover. Because that's what we do. We spontaneously give. You may be driving down the road. You may know a need, someone in your office. And you're like, I can chip in. I can be a part of this. I can spontaneously give. This is the way the man we call the Good Samaritan gave. And this is what Jesus tells us. If you don't know the story, there's this Jewish man. He's beat up and he is left for dead on a highway going from Jerusalem to Jericho. And so here come these two men. They're dressed in their religious garbs, and they've got their religious degrees and their religious pedigrees, and they walk around him. There's no compassion in their hearts for this guy. And yet here comes a Samaritan. The Samaritans are totally hated by the Jews. They call them half-breeds. They worship God in a totally different way, and they just didn't like him. And the Samaritans knew it, and the Jews knew it. And so here comes this Samaritan, and totally irrationally, over and above, he stops and he helps this man in need. Not because he's a Jew, not because he's a Samaritan, but because in his heart he knew what was right to do, and he stops and he helps the man, and he bandages up his wounds, he puts him on his donkey, and he takes him to an inn. And this is what it says in Luke chapter 10. It says, the next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man, and if his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. He spontaneously steps in, saw a need he could meet, and helped him. But I promise you, he didn't wake up that morning, right? You know the morning routine, right? You're a little stiff trying to get out of bed, right? And you're trying to find the floor because your eyes are groggy and you haven't had enough coffee. I know that's how I get out of bed in the morning. And he didn't put his feet down on the floor and go, there's going to be a man on the side of the road and I'm going to help him, right? Like, that's not what he said. But what if he woke up and he said, God, whatever you want me to do today, I'm going to do. And if that means helping somebody, then I'm going to stop and I'm going to help them. If that means using my time, my energy for somebody, then I'm going to do that over and above. And it's a mindset, because we give spontaneously. Whenever God leads us to give, we want to give. And that's what the Samaritan did. He said he could look after this man. He helped. He left money to pay to have his wounds healed and to give him rest. We give spontaneously when we see a need. I heard a story of a gentleman. He was going to his church on a Saturday night service, and he's there on Saturday night. He just really is filled with the presence of God in that moment. And there's this guest worship leader that weekend for this church, and her name was Mindy. And she didn't have a full-time job. She stayed at home to take care of her husband, Bryce, who had a very, very rare blood disease. And they were waiting on a stem cell transplant. But when she could, she would step in and she'd help her church or other churches in her community out. And this gentleman had no idea what's going on. He leaves the service, but he can't beat this feeling that he's supposed to go back and he's supposed to do something. So he wrestles with God like all night long about this. God, what am I supposed to do? God, am I supposed to go back? Like, I don't want to. And, what am I supposed to do? And he really just wrestled with God. And he wakes up the next morning and he says, I'm supposed to go back and I'm supposed to give to this lady who was leading worship. He didn't know why. He didn't know what was going on. So he goes back the next morning with an envelope in his hand and he meets the pastor and he says, here, this is for Mindy. I don't know why, but I'm supposed to get this. He's like, you don't know why? And he's like, no. He's like, why? Well, why did you do it? He's like, well, God really pressed in on me. And the pastor said, we had never told the church. She didn't really want her news being spread about. That wasn't what she was after. But here, God moved through this man, spoke to him, and out of his obedience, he was able to provide for a family that was really struggling. Parents who weren't working, a dad who was in and out of the hospital. Because this is what the church does. This is what we do. We want to spontaneously give. We want to be those people who listen to the Holy Spirit moving in our lives and in that moment and spontaneously stop and act in obedience towards God. Whatever it is, we want to do that. And there's lots of ways that we can be prepared to be spontaneous. When our kids were little, we would keep bags of food in the car, a couple little bags, just little Walmart bags, a pop-top can of vegetables or SpaghettiOs, a little plastic, spork, some crackers, maybe those tuna fish meals that you can, all you do is rip open the bag and it's got crackers and stuff. But we always had something, right, so that we could stop and we could give food to people. Maybe sometimes we carry gift cards to McDonald's or Subway or something. You can always get a little something off their value meals. And if somebody's really hungry, they're going to take your food. Right? They're going to take that. And a lot of people are like, how do I know if I'm giving to this person, they're going to go out and they're going to do something that I don't want them to do, like buy drugs or alcohol? I always say offer food. You can offer somebody food. And if they don't want your food, and they say, no, I'm really after money, well, then you're like, okay, well, maybe there is something to not give you. But if they're hungry, if they're in need, they're going to take your food. But if we had those bags in our car and we passed somebody with a sign and we didn't stop, boy, the Italian came out of my little girl, and 3 years old, and man, she was on us. I mean, why aren't we stopping? Dad, you saw that person in need. Why aren't you going to do something about it? I mean, like, she loved to be able to give in that way and to be able to spontaneously do that. And there's a lot of ways that we can be prepared to give spontaneously. Maybe at the end of the week, you got a couple dollar bills laying around from your week, and you've been carrying cash, and maybe you have a spontaneously giving envelope, right? And every Friday, you stuff a couple leftover dollar bills in it, and then when a need arises, you're prepared. Like, you've been prepared to spontaneously give, right? There's a way that we can prepare to spontaneously give, but we can't only give spontaneously. This is where most people stop. Most people give spontaneously, but they stop here, and there's a very limited difference that we can make when all we're doing is these spontaneous giving. But what if we did more than that? What if we didn't just give spontaneously, but what if we also gave strategically? What if we give prayerfully and strategically? And we had a plan. And instead of saying, I wish I could give more, we actually planned to give more. I've been telling you guys, we've been doing this Financial Peace University with these Dave Ramsey videos. A couple of people in the church are doing it with us, and we meet on Monday nights. And this is one of the things that Dave Ramsey harps on. Every dollar has a name, right? Nothing that you make is just out there in la la land. Every dollar has a name because you're planning. It's either going to this bill, or it's going to this savings account, or it's going to pay off this debt, or it's going to giving. But like, there's a plan, and he has these great forms, and at the top of every form is, what am I giving? Like, that's the first thing that he wants knocked out. Decide and plan, what are you going to give this month? And then create a plan from there. And maybe you need a cash flow worksheet week to week. Maybe you need some kind of spreadsheet that helps you track these things, but you've created a plan. You know what you're going to give, what you're able to give. And we have so many great resources out there. I've been picking on Chloe. She's not even here, so that's pretty good. But the other day, we were talking in her class. She started on Excel. She's learning Microsoft Excel. And she's like, Dad, I hate this Excel program. It's just terrible. I don't want to do it. And I was like, no, Chloe, like Excel can be fun. And she's like, Dad, I can't believe you just used fun and Excel in the same sentence, right? I like Excel. I have a number of forms that I keep track of things in Excel, and we've built, just around so we know what's going on, and there's those ways. And there have been times where I've just relied really heavily on a program like Excel. Like when we go on vacation and we've said, you know what, we're not going to put things on the credit card. I have this much money, and everything gets broken into a category, right? And I want to know exactly what we're spending on gas, or when we stop at this place, or how much our hotel bill is going to be. And then I'm checking receipts to make sure where it is, and I'm moving funds around because I got a little bit left over. But it's a plan, right? I plan not to go in debt anymore on my vacations. And we can plan to be strategic givers. We can plan out with a heart of worship to return to God through his church. We don't give last, what's left over. We want to give first. We have a plan to put God first in every single area of our lives. And this is one way that we do that. It's not that we give when we want to give, or we give when we're prompted to. It's a strategic, prayerful plan to be generous to God in an act of worship. I love what Isaiah 32:8 says. It says this about generous people. But generous people plan to do what is generous, and they stand firm in their generosity. Help me out. Generous people they plan to be generous. Anybody? Like, I had one down front. Nobody else. Say it again. What do generous people do? They plan to be generous. This is what they do. This is what the Bible calls us to do. And not only do they plan to be generous, but they stand firm in their generosity. They don't create a plan and then they get to the end of the month and they're like, oh God, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? And then they waver in it. But they stand firm in their trust in God and their plan to be generous. They planned it, and now they trust God. And they've created these whatever it is, these worksheets, these spreadsheets, their budgets. They know what they can give and what they can't give, what they can do and what they can't do. But the problem is there's so many times when we get our money in the month, and instead of planning to give, you know what we plan to do? We plan to spend. We plan to consume it, right? We have a plan to consume our money. The ads come in. We're walking through the store, and the bright yellow sales stickers on there, and our minds just go nuts, and we plan to spend. But that consumeristic mindset, that mindset that sets in when we are consumers, goes just across every aspect of our life. If I don't like this song on the radio, I'm turning it off. If this show on Netflix bothers me and I'm bored with it, I'm going to go to another, right? Because all we do is consume. The problem is that consumer mindset follows us everywhere we go. And instead of coming to church with a mindset on God, we come in here as spiritual consumers. And when we say, my needs aren't being met because we think church is about me, right? I didn't like the song, or I didn't like the sermon. I don't like the guy preaching, right? And you guys can feel that way. That's fine. But we're not spiritual consumers. A value we hold highly here at Homeport is that we want to be spiritual contributors across the board. Our whole life is lived generously, not just with our finances, but with our time and our energy and our gifts and our talents and our passions. We're serving God, not expecting to come here and be served. We don't want to be spiritual consumers. We want to be spiritual contributors. We want to produce for the kingdom of God because we don't believe that the church exists for us. We believe that we as the church exist for the world who is dying and needs to know their Savior. That's why we exist. That's our purpose in this place. And instead of just planning to make purchases, what if we as Jesus followers plan to make a bigger difference in this world through the way we lived and the way that we give? Heard another story of a guy who started tithing years ago, and he always gave 10%. One year, he felt like God had been prompting him to give a little bit more. And so he began to give 1% more a year. 1% more, 1%, 1%, 1%. And he created a plan. I could spend a little bit less here. I can consume a little bit less here. And I can give to this 1 more percent. 23 years later, he told his pastor about it. The man was giving 33% of his income away because he made a plan. And he had another guy came in one time, told his pastor, and he said, Pastor, you know what? This year I'm going to set a PGR. Do you know what a PGR is? Anybody ever set a PGR? No? Personal giving record. He was competing against himself to give more than he had ever given. He wasn't competing against anybody else. He wasn't making fun. He wasn't boasting. But internally, he said he wanted to give more. And the way he did it was by setting a goal and sticking to it. He wanted to make a difference. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because we choose to be strategic. Dawn and I have always felt just very strong about giving. And I don't want to stand up here and tell you to do anything that I'm not willing to do. And any place I'm not willing to lead you to go as a follower of Christ. And so I can't stand up here and tell you to give if I'm not giving. And so we give. We give. And I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not boasting about it. But it's been really amazing to watch God do what only God can do. And the amounts that we've been able to give that have blown us away. I look back and I'm like, I cannot believe that we were able to do what we did, to live the lifestyle that we have, and still are able to give that much away. To me, it blows me away what God has done and the way he continues to provide in our lives. But we need to have a plan. We all need to have a plan, to create a plan. We need to create a plan to give spontaneously. We need to have a plan in place to give strategically, because this is what we do. We've prayed about it, we've put focus into it, and we've created a plan so that we can give more and make a bigger difference. And there's so many of us that need to do this, that we've got to step up into this place, because this isn't what we do. Maybe we give spontaneously, but there's no plan in place to give strategically. But we want to give strategically. We want to make a difference. We want to find other ministries and other ways that we can bless. And so we have a plan. And our family, we have a plan. There are plans to give to Compassion International. I don't know if you guys have ever sponsored a child through Compassion International. And for less than $40 a month, you can help a child in a foreign country get health care and education and food and get their needs met. And that's a great plan. We are a great place to give and to help people out. We give that. Christian radio. It's always nice to be able to turn on a radio station that doesn't make your ears bleed, right? And so we were able to give to Christian radio because we believe in that ministry. And there's lots of ministries that we can give that take care of all kinds of need. But we plan to give to the church, and we have a plan to help people in need in ministries. And it doesn't happen it doesn't happen accidentally. It happens because we choose to be intentional about it. We have a plan for it. We're strategic about it. We don't just give spontaneously. Sorry, my mind blanked. We don't just give spontaneously. We don't just plan to give strategically. But there's one last area that I want to talk about this morning. We give sacrificially. We, as Christ followers, give sacrificially. And there's so many powerful examples in Scripture of people giving sacrificially. And I want to talk about one specifically out of Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12, Jesus is sitting there. He's sitting by the temple. He's watching the people give their temple taxes. And this is what it said in verse 41. Jesus sat down near the collection box in the temple, and he watched... there we go. Wrong order. He watched the crowds drop in their money. Many rich people came and put large amounts in, and then a widow came and dropped in 2 small coins. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has given more than all the others who are making contributions, for they gave a tiny part of their surplus, But she, poor as she is, she had given everything she had to live on. She made a sacrificial gift. She trusted in God to show up and to meet her needs that she couldn't meet. And it's a pretty neat story. Jesus is one of the few times you see in Scripture where Jesus is truly impressed in what he sees and the faith that he finds. And the story is, that scholars tell is that there was a little place on the side of the temple where they could give. And it was a metal container, right? And so you could hear them give. And so the guys would come along and they would just start to drop their coins in. And you can imagine the noise that it created and the people who stopped and pats on the back that people got because they took all their coins and they poured it in the metal box so that the people could see how religious they were. But here comes this little widow, and she has 2 copper coins, kind of like a penny. It's all she has. And the pastor, right, the person inside of you that jumps out and is like, no. Like, that's all you have to live on, right? It's all you have. You see all these rich people, they've already paid so much, like it's already taken care of, right? I mean, that's what we want to say inside of us because we want this person to be taken care of. But Jesus didn't want to rob her of her blessing. And so he allowed her to give sacrificially. And the woman was blessed. Why? Because it's more blessed than it is to give than it is to receive. And sacrificial giving hurts. Sacrificial, it makes you rely on God because I've given to the point where I can't do it on my own, right? C.S. Lewis says there ought to be things that you can't do in this life because of your level of giving. Maybe you can't go to that all-exclusive resort, paid for, cruise and island time, maybe you can't, stay in the nicest hotels, or maybe you can't drive the fanciest cars, maybe you won't own a McMansion, right? But there are things that our giving holds us back from because we are storing up our treasures in heaven. And right now, sacrificial giving hurts. It's hard, but it makes us really have to trust in God. How many of you guys have ever been a part of one of those trust falls? Anybody ever been a part of one of those trust falls? Sometimes they make you do them as to build teams, like at a retreat or maybe in your office. They take you off. And a trust fall is a person stands on a ledge, right? And there are all these people and they have their arms out like this and they're ready to catch you when you fall backwards, right? You can't see anything. You just have to trust them and fall into their arms, right? And if I said, hey, I'm going to do this trust fall, and I need Anthony to come down here, and I need Malcolm to come down here, and you guys are going to catch me, okay? I'm going to do this trust fall. Like, I'm not putting a lot of trust, right? I picked 2 big guys to come and help me out here, right? Like, there's no real trust there. But if I picked 2 of the smallest women in the church, and I weighed what they weigh together, and I'm like, catch me, right? There's a level of trust in that moment that I'm not going to bang my head on the floor and take them with me all the way to the ground, right? That's trust. And sacrificial giving requires us to trust God in that same way. I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know how my needs are going to be met. There's a portion of my income that's missing, but I've chosen strategically to give it to God, and yet it hurts. And God has to come through, and God does the thing that he always does. He always meets our needs. He always provides for us. He always takes care of us. And it's just so interesting to watch Jesus be truly impressed by this little widow of a woman who gave all that she had. And it wasn't $1 million. It wasn't $100,000. It wasn't $1,000. It was 2 silver coins. And she gave sacrificially. And he watched and he was impressed. I had an elder in one of the first churches I served in who really understood sacrificial giving. His family, his wife and himself had chosen that they were going to be the sole beneficiary or the sole benefactor for a mission in Haiti. And so there was a school and a church there, and they paid all of the bills by themselves. They didn't ask for help. They didn't go around raising money. Like, that was one of the ways that they sacrificially give back to the kingdom of God. And when I was working and serving alongside this church, he would tell me, always tell me about it, always about his adventures, always about the things that he was doing, about the reactions of the people, and just had these just amazing stories. It was great to see what God was doing there. And one day he came up to me and he said, Ben, I want you to go to Haiti with me. And I was like, well, I'm a poor college student, so we're going to have to wait a couple years on that one, right? And he's like, no, I'm going to pay your way. You just have to see this. You have to experience this. And again, the man sacrificially gave, and I got my passport, and he paid my airfare, he paid all my food, all my travel, and I got to go down there, and I got to experience something that was so life-changing, to see how little people had, yet how joyful they could be. People with dirt floors who are dancing and worshiping God in the streets and in their churches, and they're just so excited and elated to have a God who loves them and cares for them and takes care of them. Though they have so little, they didn't let that bother them like it bothers us. And through this man's sacrificial giving, he was able to provide a place, a church in this little itty-bitty town, a little village, actually, called Little Rock. And that's where this little thing was. And it's just such a blessing to be able to see that kind of sacrificial giving. And I wonder, when was the last time that you were able to receive a massive blessing because you gave sacrificially? Like, you chose to give sacrificially, and you were able to see it in the person. Maybe they didn't even know it was you, and you just kind of stood there and were like, that's amazing, right? Because it's not about you getting any kind of like accolades or pats on the back. Like, you did it because God called you to do it. When was the last time that you felt that way? That you gave in such a way that you felt it, but you absolutely loved the feeling that it gave you because you were a massive blessing to somebody else. Because you were a part of a massive blessing to somebody else. So this is what we do. This is who we want to be as Jesus followers. We give spontaneously, we give strategically, and we give sacrificially as we seek after God. And I want to be clear for a moment. I am asking you to be generous. I'm asking you to be generous. I'm asking you to create a plan to be generous to the church. Not because I want your money, not because I'm after your money, not because God is after your money, but because God's after our hearts. And if we worship money, we're never going to worship God. And God knows that. And so he calls on us to give a portion back, to rely on him and trust on him in those ways. And it does take it hard. It is hard. And there are things that we can't do. But we want to give generously to church. We want to be irrationally generous to the church. But also, when we call on the church to be generous, there's a portion of it is that you're generous because you believe in the mission of this church. You believe in what we're trying to accomplish, that you've experienced God's presence here, and you want to help other people experience God's presence here. And if you don't feel that way, and this isn't the church that you can feel that way in, let me encourage you to find a church that you can, because you're stifling your own growth if you can't give to the church. We're not going to reach the level of spiritual maturity if we can't be like that widow. Maybe we don't give a lot. Maybe we don't have a lot to give, but we've learned what it means to sacrificially give, and that's what we do. Because it's such an immense blessing. I don't want your money. I want you to experience all that God has for you. And if you can't find that here, then let us help you find a place there. I know some amazing churches in this town. And maybe that's where you can grow. And maybe that's where you can get involved and plugged in. This is what we do. We want to be a church that leads with generosity. It's a value that we hold, that we will live generous in every aspect of our life. This is what we do. I'll tell you without, I'm skipping ahead, I apologize. There is one thing that we won't do. And it's something that to hear stories of this drives me insane. Like, I'd be busting down walls and breaking through windows. But there are churches that will say they're collecting an offering, and they will lock the doors or close the doors and not let anybody leave until they've met that. And that, like, still happens today, right? Like, I'm going through a window at that point, like, right? Like, that's not who we are. Like, when we give an offering meditation on Sunday mornings, or we teach through what the Bible has to say about money, it's not because we're begging for your money. I don't want your money, right? I mean, like I'll be dead honest with you. I don't. There are resources that are needed to provide for this ministry, and God graciously provides them, but I want to see you grow. So I'm not begging for your money. We're not going to beg for your money. That's not what this is about. If you're a giver, I'm not ever guilting you to give more. I'm teaching somebody else about giving, because we want that blessing to go to somebody else as well. I'll tell you without apology that Dawn and I steward our personal finances with integrity. We want you to know that we do this. Like, I'm not asking you to do something we don't do. This is something that we do. As a church leaders, we do the same thing. We steward these finances and that you guys give, your blessings that you pour into this church. We want to steward them well. We want to take care of them. We as a church give away 10% of everything that we bring in to missions that go on all around the world, whether it's something locally or something internationally. We want to be a part of a church that gives away and supports missions. We want to lead with irrational generosity. We want to be a church who is massively generous. We want to inspire you guys to give. We want to inspire you guys to trust in God. And with God's help, we're going to wisely and prayerfully steward all of these needs. We're going to find the needs that make the biggest difference in this world, and we're going to do something about it, because that's what we've been called to do as the church. We want to help people who are in need. We want to help start more churches around the world. Like, we really want people to become fully devoted followers of Christ from this spot in St. Augustine all the way around the world. And your resources help us do just that. This morning, in a few moments, you're going to take out the envelope that's in your bulletin if you're participating in the thank offering. In the last couple years, people said it's been kind of, what am I supposed to do? The thank offering goes in your envelope, or you can give online. That little blue line on the bottom of the envelope is a web address that you can do. You can give that gift online if that's how you choose. But we're going to collect this offering. And we don't collect offerings throughout the years. We don't do like a love offering for every little need that comes up. But years ago, the church got together and they said, we're going to take up this one offering, big or small. We're going to take up this one offering to give it away and to help take care of needs in our community. And this year we've selected some organizations that we want to help out specifically. We want to help out Life Services. Life Services provides the resources to mothers that are pregnant. Maybe they don't have never experienced pregnancy before. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they're considering abortion. And so they have a mobile ultrasound unit, and they go around different parts of the county and into Palatka, and they do free ultrasounds. So these mothers can hear the heartbeats of their children, right? And explain to them that there are other ways. And so they're in desperate need of a new RV. They've got like a 20-year-old RV or 30-year-old RV that they've been using, and they need a new RV. And so a portion of what we're taking up today and throughout the next couple of weeks, we're going to give to them a portion of that. We have a heart for homeless students in our community. Over 400 homeless students have been identified this year alone. Last year it was over 800. And so we want to be able to take a portion of these finances and give it to the school board towards a fund that specifically goes to help homeless students. It doesn't go to help anybody else. It doesn't pay salaries. It doesn't pay for books or energy, none of that kind of stuff, electricity for the schools. It goes just to the homeless students to pay things for like cap and gowns. When you're a homeless student, you have no parent at home. Who pays for your cap and gown, right? We want them to walk. They've worked really hard to get through school, especially if they've been homeless at any portion of that. And so maybe they pay out gift cards. They pay rent for a girl. It's like we want to be able to partake of that. We want to help out disaster relief victims, people in our own community who are still reeling from the effects of Hurricane Irma. They just got into their home right before Irma from Matthew, and bam, here's another hurricane. The city's another flood ground, and they're back damaged. And there's a lot of people that are still in need. And so we want to take these funds and be able to help them as well. Church, this is what we do. We do it because this is what Jesus did for us. Before we deserved it, while we were still sinners, Christ went and he died for you and for me on the cross. He showed the first act of generosity to us. Even while we didn't deserve it, he gave. And so we give back a portion of what he's given us. This is what we do. We spontaneously give, we strategically give, but we also give sacrificially. This morning, we're going to do something a little bit different for our question of the day as we go into our response time. I just want you to stop where you're at and just take just a minute, and I want you to ponder this question. What would a practical step toward abundant giving look like in your life? You know your situation, you know your finances, you know your plan, but what would a practical step towards abundant giving look like in your life? Let's go ahead and we're going to dim the lights, and I'm going to come back and pray over our response time in just a minute.